Good day, everybody, and a happy new year to you. It's 2004, and the 2004 year is starting off strong. Sorry for not having a video up for a bit, but the way my work works is at the end of the year is always heck, and it's still heck, but what the heck, I've got to do videos. So, thank you guys very much for your patience. I wish it was good news that I had to share with you, but it's more not so great news, at least not for one well-known furry website. Just before the ball dropped on the new year, a furry website that has a lot of, let's say, risque content had to make a decision similar to another major adult website and pull their content from North Carolina. Basically, they blocked the entire state of North Carolina. This is due to the enactment of a law that was signed in late September called the PVE Act. So the PVE Act, basically, the concept, or at least the concept and idea of it, is that websites which have more than a third, of its content is considered harmful to minors, right? And harmful to minors is defined within the law itself, and it was previously defined before the PVE Act. But basically, any content that is harmful to minors, or at least more than 1/3 of a site is that way, that site basically needs to implement a means in which to card their users to make sure that minors are staying outside the door, as it were. So this is the message that many people have seen, and it's still up on e621 at the time of this video. Obviously, as new things come out, usually they change this after a while, but basically it notes that due to the current legal situation in North Carolina and uncertainty surrounding it, we will be blocking access to e621.net from North Carolina until we can consult with our legal counsel on this matter. We did not come to this decision lightly, and we will do what we can as we can to rectify and remedy this situation so that we can restore access to those users that are affected by this manner. And we sincerely apologize. So, very professionally made letter, and a very, very interesting action that e621 felt it was forced to take. But e621 is not alone in this. Pornhub is probably the more well-known group that had to block North Carolina. And a lot of news coverage has come of this, as it were. It's a new age where internet sites are starting to become more, the government is putting more onus onto internet sites to do this. Now, it might have good intentions, but you might go, well, this, and some people who are very proponents of this law may make statements such as like, well, this just proves that they're bad apples and that they had no interest in protecting underage individuals from content that's not meant to be served to them, because why would they just bow out of this responsibility that the government has laid forth before them? And one of the big issues with the law is how it is written, unfortunately. Despite it being well-intentioned, when you're talking about creating laws, it is very important to understand that if you're going to put forward something with a certain intent, that you weigh all possibilities to make the transition as seamless and as non-dubious and not harmful to as many parties as not as harmful to any legal parties as possible. And what I mean by all this is that you need to make sure that every angle is covered so that the intent of your law is being followed and all that. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's the case of what's happened here. And the reason being is that I have a link in the description below to my Flare article that goes a little bit more into the details, and it has links to the actual law itself, and I will provide some of those links in the description below here so that you can read this law yourself. But one of the biggest problems that it has is that it puts a big quagmire onto the site runners themselves, such as e621 or Pornhub. It does look out, it basically has the interests of two parties at heart. parents of underage minors who want to protect their kids, underage individuals who don't want to stumble across things, unwarrantedly, and 3, adults who are adult entertainment connoisseurs and don't want their identity taken by the government, or want to see that, or may see this as an act of the government of trying to spy on people, or maybe even politicians who are adult work connoisseurs, wink wink, right, who don't want the possibility of their perusals of websites such as this out in the public sphere, so they want to make sure that there is a layer of protection. It's similarly when you go to a club or go to a thing, that you show your ID to get into the door, but they don't necessarily retain who is on the ID card, right? They check your picture, they check your name, they check your age, right, your date of birth, and they go, hey, and they might say your name, hi Joe, right? So, oh, cool, Joe, thank you very much. And he's like, if you go, who's Joe? It's like, oh, that's what your ID said. Is that not you, right? So, they don't retain that Joe went to the club. They just use that ID for that. So they want something similar for online world, which the law sort of acts like it's implemented currently, which it isn't really. There are ways maybe in this current video sharing world that we could implement something to that regard, and if more states follow suit, North Carolina, there might be a business in creating a third-party contractor thing that ties that an ID was checked, right, with the user on the internet, basically by a third party, and nothing else is retained, right? The people who run the website can't see or maintain your information. This third party basically just IDs you and then tells the website this username is cleared, right? And that clearance can happen for things. That needs to be developed, though. And the problem for things like e621 and Pornhub is that these ideas are not developed. So the technologies has got to catch up with the law. Getting a little bit ahead of myself, I guess, but going back to it, the reason this, and here's the screenshot of this quagmire, right? It's this kind of part of the law where it kind of puts a lot of responsibility onto the websites. In this case, it says that age verification must be done, and it says it must be a commercially available database. This is actually regular users, and it's like what commercially, they say to use this, right? But they don't give examples of this thing existing, right? It's a commercially available database that is regularly used by businesses and governmental entities for purpose of age and identity verification. Those things exist, and if they do, can the government provide examples? Of course, they can't put that, and that's the problem with writing law, is they can't really give examples, because giving it, those examples may not exist in the future. But is there a license, right? So the government needs, if the government is going to create these institutions that other institutions have to utilize, right? Is there a license that these databases or these individuals who can ID people have that makes them legitimate in the government's eyes, right? How do you know which ones are or not? That's up for debate unless you put it in words, right? Or unless you make another sort of law that kind of defines those more curation. But as I said, it's an idea, but it's not when it comes to laws, you can't just give out an idea. You have to this is the process we're using. If we're going to have a commercially available database that is regularly used by business and governmental entities, what does regularly used by mean? Once, twice, 3 times a lady? Is it every day? Is it what? So which ones have this seal of approval? And this is stuff that Pornhub and e621 have to hash out. Basically, And this is where another commercially reasonable method of age identification verification in individual attempting to access material. So I don't know, like maybe the person, maybe number 2 is better because it's a little bit more broad, and it certainly doesn't put behind it like, oh, it has to be a commonly used thing. But then again, like, what is a reasonable method, right? And how is that defined, right? Are there other laws that you can utilize to define that? We'll get to that later. But the biggest problem that the quagmire that really gets put in is that while they're being told that they have to use some means of identifying the users, points B and point C basically bring home that it's not so easy, right? So these entities that are being used to identify people, well, they can't retain information, right? And there are 2 ways that sites can become held civilly liable to basically a lawsuit at this point based on this law, and that is if they're not doing anything to identify minors whatsoever, or B, they are basically they are retaining information, right? And this comes back to like, let's think of a weird scenario. Let's think of a scenario where a website, an adult website, does put in identification checks, and let's say an underage person uses some sort of age verification method, and they basically lie about their age. Let's say this teen, right? Let's say this 14-year-old or something goes to their parents' room, finds their dad's wallet, sneaks their ID card out, and then basically uses that card in that system to basically log into that system, right? So what happens if Mama Bear comes in and sees that 14-year-old now looking at this adult website and going, "Junior! What is that website?" "Oh, they just let me in, Mommy. They just let me in. Look at this. Look at this. You could sue them." And then Mommy's going to go like, "Oh, well, now you're talking my language, son." So it's going to be son. Teenage boys are probably going to be more looking for sites like that than teenage girls. But what do I know? As someone who was a teenage boy at one point in their lives. No comment, but I just commented. Anyways, like, let's say that happens, right? So what's going to end up happening, right? So what does the site have to defend themselves? Well, they can say, well, we have an age verification system in place, and clearly it was circumvented in some way, shape, or form. Either the person who put their ID in left the computer on, and the junior came in looking at it, and basically at that point it's he said, she said. But if they had retained the information, they could have said, "Hey, this is who logged in. They said they were, like Mr. Big Smith, who was like 37 years old or 40 years old, right?" And now, like, the mom's like, "Oh, son, you lied to me, son. You went on that website with your dad's ID. How could you betray me like this?" And then the boy would look to his mom and go, "But, Mommy, you can sue them because they retained Dad's ID." And the mom's like, "Son, why are you reading North Carolina legislation about this? What else aren't you telling me?" Anyways, but you can see how this becomes a quagmire. It's a danged if you do, danged if you don't situation. You can ID people in a manner to make sure that minors aren't getting in, but if you show evidence of the IDs that you're that you're taking and making sure that people are overage, then you're also liable. So it becomes an issue where it's too risky for the sites have assessed at this time. This is too risky for them to be able to put this kind of content websites on it. Now, was this law written poorly? If the intention of the law was to protect minors from the thing and protect people's ID and make sure that these websites can continue operating without too much hindrance, then no. I think they focused on 1 and 2, not so much 3. And unfortunately, it sort of had a chilling effect for those websites. But if the intention was to have those websites, those adult entertainment websites, being banned from North Carolina in general, basically a porn purge, if you will, an absolution of the adult stuff, right? If they wanted prohibition. I was mixing up words in my mind there just for a moment. If they wanted a prohibition of porn, as it were, like it's a beautifully written law. That's like it makes it seem like it's innocent enough. It's like, oh, we're trying to protect the children. No, you're trying to create a porn prohibition. Like, but you're not going right for the throat, because if you went right for the throat, then it could be thrown easily on First Amendment grounds. So you're trying to circumvent the First Amendment thing by saying, look, we gave them a reasonable option to try to mitigate the situation, but they're the ones being unreasonable, kind of a thing. And if you want evidence that this is sort of the intent of that law, this is what one of the North Carolina state senators said. We're willing to work with anybody to improve the law and to make it better target what we want to do, which is to protect children. A little challenging to think that this industry, the porn industry basically, is some kind of great player with clean hands. So that final sentence kind of shows that this law was made in an insular manner, and that's the reason I used those wordages in my headline when discussing this situation. That final sentence tells everything that you need to know. Sure, they listened to concerned parents, and sure, they listened to privacy advocates who were worried about people peeping in on their online perversions, as it were. As adults, they are legal tax-paying adults, and they should be able to do it, dang it. And government shouldn't be peeping on it. The government's just trying to use this law to peep in on us. Oh, the government's like, oh, no, we're not. See, look, we're telling them not to retain the information, and if they retain the information, you could sue them. See how nice we are? Like, so they took that into consideration. They took the other side. They took that side into consideration, but they did not talk to anyone who works They didn't talk to e621, absolutely, but they even the more common one, right? Pornhub, right? They certainly didn't talk to them, because it's hard to imagine, because in these articles, like Pornhub and things like that are saying things like this is going to make it so that people are going to be searching more on the dark web for this sort of entertainment, right? And you might even have institutions that play less with the legalities of things and don't have as many standards and as many implementations as Pornhub does to protect its workers who are in that industry, right? So, this sort of second sentence by this state senator is basically trying to be on the defensive about that sort of response from the industry. So that's sort of what we see here. But unfortunately for the senator, this defensiveness reveals, excuse me, I'm going to edit that out, but it reveals this sort of, they didn't talk to them because, they don't have clean hands. Oh, their hands are so dirty. Clean those hands. But if she's willing to work with anybody, as she says, I'll give one piece of advice. And that is another thing I mentioned in the article. And that is, there is a law when it comes to identification, right, and IDing people. The protection of that scenario that I talked about earlier, where a child is using an ID to defraud the website and trying to get access to it, there is laws on the books in North Carolina to help protect businesses from people who falsify their identification to access goods that would be illegal to them otherwise, such as alcohol, drugs, and things like that. And there's a link in the description below, and there's a link in the other thing. Here it is. Like, here is the law that does that, right? That if it's basically considered a class 1 misdemeanor if you use a false identification in order to try to access drugs and alcohol and things like that, then there is a protection for the business side, right? And the interesting thing is that this law defines which kind of businesses are protected by that, right? Enter a place where alcoholic beverages are sold, obtain alcoholic beverages, obtain or attempt to purchase alcoholic beverages. So most of it talks about alcoholic beverages, but it's like there's obviously like clubs and other things and other types of drugs that also require ID, and I'm sure that those are also covered by that, but you'd have to go into the law to see that. But nowhere in this new law, this PVE Act, is there an extension of that law that protects adult websites who choose to implement this law and try to acquire identification to ensure that the person who's using the website is underage, that if a person is underage and they utilize false identification, that they could be held criminally liable for their behavior. And the fact that North Carolina completely overlooked that as an option when writing this law, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird blunder to me. It's kind of like one of those things that it's like this is bases are loaded, man. Just get it into the outfield. Just get anything. Someone do something, right? It's just like it's a golf ball. It's like right next to the hole. It's like all you gotta do is tap it in, and completely missed. Once again, this is not as bad as the Oklahoma law. This is why I'm not ranting as hard at it. Because at the end of the day, they're not trying to take away schools from rural kids like in Oklahoma, which luckily I heard that law I think it fell through, luckily for us, and luckily for the people in Oklahoma rural areas. But basically, at the end of the day, it's something that's fixable. One other thing to note, obviously there's options for adults in North Carolina, such as VPNs, but I would also be cautious because if you're underage, please don't use a VPN to try to access these sites. And the reason I say please don't do that is because there are things in the law for the PVE Act that protect the internet service providers, right, from being held liable for the content that is being picked up on. It's basically the sites that are held liable, and that's their intent. But I will note that VPNs, virtual private networks, are not in the protected class part of the law. So if an underage person uses a VPN to circumvent these things, and then the parents decides to sue one of these porn websites, what the porn websites should do is talk to a lawyer and say, they used a VPN to circumvent this. Can we as the porn website sue the VPN? Because we don't want our content shared in this area, and they're not protected from North Carolina law for that. So just be cautious, because you could open up a whole can of worms, which be presenting that probably might have. So just be cautious. There's also so there are ways that things can work against it. Obviously, you can use VPNs. Another option would be obviously the whole using a video conference. If a third-party service decides to do this show me your ID thing, they could do a service where they have a video conference thing, and the user logs in using their thing, and then the third party goes, you're going to be sent to a third-party site, and you're going to do a video conference, and they're going to have you show ID, and then basically they're probably going to have you perform some weird task within the space that you're in, saying pat your head and rub your belly, or I see like go over there and like and just like wave your arm a little bit, right? Or give them some sort of command so that way it's not artificial intelligence, right? Or it's not some caricature, and they have to take off the they can't have like a suit on, like, right? They have to be in the human flesh and do that. So there are options these days, unlike back when the internet was first a thing. And I was like, why don't they card people like they do out in the world, right? When I was just a young adult. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, because you can't do video things on the video thing. So times have changed. It may be possible to implement something in this regard. It's just that the law is really not helping in that regard. It's just creating a new puzzle to solve, because that's all lawmakers are really good at doing, is giving us more puzzles to solve. I think that's about it. I think that covers just about everything that I wanted to cover. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you. Welcome to this new year, and hopefully it treats you well. Thank you very much. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section, and thank you very much. I did have one more thing, though. I've been giving the government a lot of criticism here. I'm about to give one to porn. I'm about to note something here a little bit at the end of the video. As a mark sort of against Pornhub and e621. I know, shocking, for going to be criticizing e621. But this law was signed by the government of North Carolina at in the last week of September. So we had October, November, and December to talk to your lawyers about implementation. If you were going to talk to your lawyers about implementation, where were you doing for the past 3 months? You know, it's one of those things. It's like it's a criticism, okay? But on the other side of it, I'm talking about it right now, right? It was clearly if it. You know, you go, well, obviously they wanted to, bring attention to the situation, and there's no better way of doing it than just blocking access to your thing to the website, because you're not going to work, because the government isn't working with you, right? Which they clearly weren't, based on that quote earlier. And so I'm talking about it now. It worked, congratulations, but just know that it's like there are going to be people who are like, hey, we gave you time to talk to your lawyer, so that's the reason we had the difference between when it was signed into law and when the law was actually implemented. Just the one caveat. I had to give North Carolina 1 point, right? They don't have a lot of points right now. I'll give them that one. That's the fig leaf. That was the bonus. That was the bonus for the people who stuck around. But anyways, that's all. I'm done. Now that I've burned the bridges with e621, I'm done. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys. Oh, man. Why is it my roommate's got to do that? Man, why do I got to always speak what I think about instead of, actually, worrying about what other, how, you're not making friends in the fandom by talking like that, Rue. Come on now. Anyways. Ugh.